My name is Ava, and I'm 36 years old. For most of my life, I believed that family meant showing up. That no matter how complicated, no matter how much history, no matter how many disappointments you've accumulated over the years, when someone you love is scared and alone, you show up. You put your own plans aside. You choose them. I believed that until the day I woke up from brain surgery and found out my family had been on a cruise ship for 5 days, posting pictures of themselves in snorkeling gear while I was in an operating room. After that, I learned a different lesson entirely. I grew up in a family where sacrifice was a one-way street. My parents, Carol and Jim, had 2 children, me and my younger brother Tyler. Tyler was the golden child from the moment he was born. He had our mother's smile, our father's easy charm, and an uncanny ability to avoid responsibility in any form. School was hard for him, not because he wasn't smart, but because he couldn't be bothered. Homework was boring. Teachers were unfair. Rules were meant to be broken. I was the responsible one, the one who studied, who worked part-time jobs, who saved every dollar I could. I got good grades not because I was brilliant, but because I understood, even as a child, that I would have to build my own future. No one was going to hand me anything. But here's something I've never told anyone. Tyler wasn't always the villain of my childhood. When I was 10 and he was 7, I came home from school crying because a group of girls had made fun of my secondhand clothes. Tyler sat with me on the porch steps while I sobbed, patting my back awkwardly. The next day, he got into a fight with one of those girls' brothers, got his nose bloodied, and when our mother asked why, he just shrugged and said, he deserved it. He never told me directly that it was about me, but I knew. I knew because he started avoiding eye contact whenever the subject came up, and because the girl who'd mocked me suddenly stopped. That was Tyler, loyal in his own broken way, but never able to sustain it. I think, looking back, that Tyler was drowning from the very beginning, not in money problems or academic pressure, but in the weight of our parents' expectations. They wanted him to be something he wasn't, a scholar, an athlete, a success story. And when he couldn't live up to that, when he failed and failed again, they didn't push him harder, they just gave up. They lowered their standards so far that nothing was expected of him anymore. And Tyler, sensing that he could never meet their original hopes, stopped trying altogether. It doesn't excuse what he became, but it explains it. My father ran a small construction company that always seemed to be one bad month away from collapse. My mother worked part-time at a bookstore, which she loved but which paid almost nothing. We weren't poor in the dramatic sense, but money was always tight, and I learned early that asking for things was a burden. Tyler never learned that lesson. He asked for everything and got most of it. New video games, expensive sneakers, a car when he turned 16, even though he'd failed his driving test twice. My parents always found a way, even when it meant skipping meals or putting off repairs. He's a boy, my mother would say, as if that explained everything. He needs to keep up with his friends. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear Tyler in his room, talking to himself. Not conversation, more like a running monologue of self-criticism. Stupid, he'd mutter, can't do anything right. I never mentioned it to him. I don't know if he even realized I could hear. When I was 18, I left for college on a scholarship. It wasn't a full ride, but it was enough to cover tuition and books if I worked part-time for living expenses. I studied architecture, not because I was passionate about buildings, but because it was a practical degree that would lead to a stable career. I was good at it. Better than I'd expected. There was something satisfying about designing spaces, about creating structures that would stand for generations. I graduated with honors and got a job at a firm in the city. I worked my way up, project by project, until I had my own small practice. By the time I was 30, I was earning more money than my parents had ever seen. They were proud of me, in their own way, but there was always an undercurrent of resentment. They'd sacrificed so much, they said. They'd worked so hard. And now I was off living my fancy city life while they struggled to make ends meet. I didn't see it that way. I saw parents who'd chosen to pour everything into their son, leaving nothing for themselves. I saw a father whose business was failing because he was too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to change. I saw a mother who'd given up her dreams long ago and now spent her days watching television and complaining about how unfair life was. But they were still my parents, and when the bank threatened to foreclose on their house, I couldn't turn my back on them. The call came on a Sunday afternoon. My mother was crying, her voice high and panicked. "Ava, we're going to lose the house. Your father took out a second mortgage, and we can't make the payments, and the bank says they're going to foreclose." I listened, my stomach sinking. I'd known my father's business was struggling, but I hadn't realized it was this bad. A second mortgage? He'd never mentioned that. "How much do you owe?" I asked. "I don't know. It's complicated, but they want $60,000 to bring the loan current, and we don't have it." $60,000. It was more than I had in savings, but not more than I could borrow. I'd been saving for a down payment on my own place, a small condo maybe, something that would finally be mine. But this was my parents, my family. How could I let them lose their home? "I'll figure something out," I said. "Just give me a few days." I hung up and stared at the wall. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't know if I could do it. In the end, I didn't just help them with the $60,000. And I did something bigger, something that would prove, once and for all, that I was the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who always showed up. I bought the house. Not their old house. That was too far gone, too buried in debt. Instead, I used my savings as a down payment on a smaller, more modest house in the same town. A 3-bedroom ranch with a small yard and a kitchen that needed updating. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe and had room for all of them. I put the deed in my name. That was important, I told myself. Not because I didn't trust them, but because it was my investment, my future. I would let them live there rent-free, and in exchange, I would own the property. It was a good arrangement, fair, sensible. "You're a lifesaver," my mother said, hugging me tightly. "We don't know what we'd do without you." "You won't have to find out," I said. Tyler was less effusive. He'd been living with my parents after dropping out of community college, and the move to a smaller house meant he'd have to share a room with his father. "This place is tiny," he complained. "Where am I supposed to put my stuff?" "You'll manage," I said. He rolled his eyes but didn't argue. But later that evening, I found him on the back porch, staring at the overgrown yard. He didn't hear me come out. "I'm sorry," he said, not turning around. "About the room thing. I'm not good at this." "Good at what?" "Any of it." He laughed bitterly. "Being a person." I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, and after a moment he went back inside. The arrangement worked for a while. I paid the mortgage, the property taxes, and most of the utilities. My parents paid nothing, which had been the agreement. They were supposed to be saving money, rebuilding their lives, getting back on their feet. But months passed, and nothing changed. My father's business limped along, never quite failing but never succeeding either. My mother continued working part-time at the bookstore, spending her evenings watching reality television. Tyler continued doing nothing, as far as I could tell, except sleeping late and complaining about the food. Whenever I visited, which wasn't often, since I lived 2 hours away and worked long hours, I'd find the house in a state of chaos. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry overflowing, the lawn overgrown. It was as if they'd decided that because they didn't own the house, they didn't have to take care of it. "You need to talk to them," my best friend Rachel said, after I'd vented to her about the latest visit. "They're treating your house like a flop house." "I know," I said. "But what am I supposed to do? Evict my own parents?" "Yes. Or at least set some boundaries." I knew she was right, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. They were my parents. They'd raised me, after all. How could I turn my back on them now? So I did nothing. I kept paying the bills. I kept making excuses. I kept telling myself that things would get better. They didn't. The headaches started about a year after I bought the house. At first, I dismissed them as stress. I was working too hard, sleeping too little, carrying too much. But the headaches got worse, and then my vision started to blur. I saw a doctor, then a specialist, then a neurologist. The diagnosis came on a Friday afternoon. I sat in a sterile office, my hands folded in my lap, while a doctor with kind eyes explained the results of my MRI. "You have a tumor," he said. "It's benign, which is good news, but it's located near your optic nerve, and it's growing. If we don't remove it, you could lose your vision." The words floated past me, unreal and distant. A tumor, brain surgery, losing my vision. "What are my options?" I asked. "Surgery is the only real option. It's a delicate procedure, but the success rate is high. The recovery will take several weeks, but you should be able to return to work within a month." A month. A month off work. A month of my life, gone. "Can it wait?" I asked. "I have projects." "It can't wait," the doctor said firmly. "The longer we wait, the greater the risk. I recommend scheduling the surgery as soon as possible." I nodded, feeling numb. "Okay, let's do it." The surgery was scheduled for March 14th. I called my mother that night to tell her the news. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I have a brain tumor. It's benign, but I need surgery." There was a pause. "Brain surgery? Oh, honey, that sounds scary." "It is scary. The surgery is scheduled for March 14th. I'm going to need help during recovery. I was hoping you could come stay with me for a few weeks." Another pause. Longer this time. "March 14th? That's… What?" "Well, honey, we've been planning a cruise. Your father and I, and Tyler. It leaves March 12th. We've already paid for it." I felt my heart sink. "A cruise? It's a family vacation. We've been looking forward to it for months. It's non-refundable. You know how these things are." "Mom, I'm having brain surgery. Can't you reschedule?" She sighed, that long-suffering sigh I'd heard my entire life. "Ava, you know we can't afford to lose the money. And the surgery is benign, right? You said so yourself. You'll be fine." I didn't say I'd be fine. I said the tumor is benign. The surgery is still serious. I could lose my vision if something goes wrong. "You'll be in good hands," she said, her voice bright and reassuring. "The doctors know what they're doing, and will call you every day from the ship. I promise." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand that she choose me, just this once, after all the times I'd chosen them. But I didn't. I just said, "Okay, Mom, have a good trip." The weeks leading up to the surgery were a blur of appointments and preparations. I arranged for Rachel to stay with me during the first few days of recovery. I set up automatic bill payments, organized my files, and made a list of everything I'd need when I came home from the hospital. My mother called a few days before the cruise to wish me luck. "We'll be thinking of you," she said. "Send us updates when you can." "I'll be unconscious for most of it," I said. "Then send updates after. We'll be back on the 19th. The 19th, 5 days after my surgery. 5 days after someone would cut into my skull and remove a tumor from my brain. "Enjoy your cruise," I said, and hung up. The morning of the surgery, Rachel drove me to the hospital. She held my hand during check-in, made jokes to distract me from the IV, and promised to be there when I woke up. "You're going to be fine," she said. "And I'll be right here." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything would be okay, that the surgery would be successful, that I'd wake up with my vision intact and my future secure. But I was terrified, more terrified than I'd ever been in my life. As the anesthesiologist wheeled me into the operating room, I thought about my parents, about the cruise ship, about the photos they'd be taking while I was under the knife. I thought about the word family and what it really meant. Then everything went dark. I woke up in a recovery room, my head wrapped in bandages, my body aching. The first thing I saw was Rachel's face, hovering over me with an expression of relief. "You're awake," she said. "Thank God." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Rachel held a cup of water to my lips, and I drank greedily. "The surgery went well," she said. "The doctors said they got the whole tumor. Your vision should be fine." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me. I'm just glad you're okay." I closed my eyes, exhausted, but before I drifted back to sleep, I reached for my phone on the bedside table. There were no messages from my parents. When I woke again, it was evening. Rachel was still there, reading a magazine. She looked up when I stirred. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I got hit by a truck." I reached for my phone. "Any messages?" Rachel's expression shifted. "Ava, let me see." I unlocked the phone and opened my messages. There, at the top, was a photo from my mother. It showed her and my father on the deck of a cruise ship, drinks in hand, beaming at the camera. The caption read, "Wish you were here." I stared at the photo for a long time. The word "here" echoed in my head, mocking me. Here was a cruise ship in the Caribbean. Here was a family vacation I'd been excluded from. Here was my mother, smiling, while I lay in a hospital bed with bandages on my head. I scrolled through her social media feed. More photos. Tyler in a snorkeling mask. My father playing shuffleboard. A group shot at dinner, everyone raising their glasses. "Family time is the best time," my mother had captioned it. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That had been broken long ago. Something else. Something harder. Something that felt almost like resolve. The next day, I received a text from my father. "Hope surgery went well. Mom says we'll call you later." Later never came. I spent 5 days in the hospital. Rachel visited every day, bringing books and magazines, and the kind of quiet company that didn't require conversation. She didn't mention my family, and I didn't bring them up. There was nothing to say. On the 5th day, I was discharged. Rachel drove me home, helped me settle into bed, and stocked the refrigerator with easy-to-prepare meals. "Call me if you need anything," she said. "I mean it. I will." She hugged me gently, careful to avoid the bandages on my head. "You're stronger than you think, Ava. Don't forget that." I watched her leave, then lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my family, still on their cruise, still posting photos, still pretending that I didn't exist. And I thought about the house I'd bought for them, the house they were living in rent-free, the house with my name on the deed. Maybe it was time to remind them who actually owned it. The 2 weeks after my surgery were the loneliest of my life. Rachel came by every day, bringing food and company and the kind of quiet support that doesn't ask for anything in return. She'd sit with me while I napped, help me change the bandages, and make sure I was taking my medication on schedule. She never mentioned my family, and I never brought them up. The silence between us on that subject said everything. My parents called exactly once during that period. It was a brief, awkward conversation that lasted less than 3 minutes. They'd just gotten back from the cruise, my mother said. They were exhausted, she said. They'd had a wonderful time, she said. How was I feeling? Fine, I said. Recovering. That's wonderful, honey. We'll come visit you soon, I promise. We just need to settle back in first. Of course, I said. Take your time. I hung up and stared at the phone. The word soon echoed in my head, empty and meaningless. I'd been home from the hospital for 4 days by then. They'd been back from their cruise for 2, and they still hadn't found the time to see their daughter who'd just had brain surgery. The visit, when it finally came, was a disaster. My mother arrived alone, 3 weeks after my surgery. She brought a casserole, my favorite, chicken and rice, and a vase of wilting flowers from the grocery store. She hugged me gingerly, careful not to touch my head, and then spent the next hour talking about the cruise. The food was incredible, Ava. You wouldn't believe the buffets. And the entertainment. They had a different show every night. Tyler even won a dance contest. That's nice, I said, my voice flat. We took so many pictures. I'll have to show you when I get them printed. She paused, finally seeming to notice my lack of enthusiasm. How are you feeling, really? I had brain surgery, Mom. I'm tired. I'm in pain, and I'm trying to figure out how to manage my business while I recover. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, you'll bounce back. You always do. You've always been so strong, Ava. Not like your brother. He's so sensitive, you know. He needs a lot of support. I stared at her. Tyler is 28 years old, Mom. He's not a child. He's still my son. And he's going through a rough patch right now. He's trying to figure out his life. What about me? I just had brain surgery. I could have died. And you went on a cruise. She flinched but quickly recovered. The cruise was already paid for, Ava. We told you that. It wasn't like we could get a refund. You could have chosen not to go. And lose all that money? Your father and I saved for months for that trip. It was the first real vacation we've had in years. Are you saying we shouldn't have gone? I looked at her, at this woman who'd spent her entire life putting herself first, even as she pretended to sacrifice for her children. I saw the defensiveness in her eyes, the refusal to accept any responsibility, the stubborn insistence that she'd done nothing wrong. I'm not saying anything, I said quietly. I'm just telling you how I feel. She stayed for another hour, but the conversation never recovered. She talked about the weather, about the neighbors, about the latest drama in her book club. She didn't ask about my surgery again. She didn't ask about my recovery. She didn't ask if I needed anything. When she finally left, I felt nothing but relief. A month after my surgery, I was cleared to drive. My incisions had healed, my vision was stable, and the doctors said I was making excellent progress. I still tired easily, but I could work from home and manage the basics of my life. The first place I drove was the house. I'm not sure what I expected to find. Maybe I thought seeing it would make me feel better, remind me why I'd bought it in the first place. Maybe I thought my family would have taken care of it in my absence. They hadn't. The front lawn was overgrown, the grass nearly knee-high. The flower beds I'd planted were choked with weeds. The porch was cluttered with empty boxes and discarded furniture. The gutters were sagging, and one of the shutters hung at an angle. I used my key to open the front door. I'd kept a copy for emergencies, and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Stale smoke, rotting food, and the unmistakable odor of neglect. The living room was a disaster. Dirty dishes covered every surface. Empty beer cans littered the floor. The carpet was stained, and the walls were marked with scuffs and scratches. I walked through the house, my heart sinking with each step. The kitchen was worse. The sink overflowing, the counters covered in crumbs and spills, the refrigerator door slightly ajar. The bedrooms were cluttered with clothes and junk, the beds unmade. They'd been living like this, in my house, for months. I found my mother in the back bedroom, watching television in her pajamas. She looked up when I walked in, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Ava, what are you doing here? You should be resting." "I came to check on the house," I said, my voice tight. "It's a disaster, Mom. How can you live like this?" She shrugged. "We've been busy. Your father's working, Tyler's been helping out, and I've been trying to keep up with everything. It's hard, you know, taking care of a whole house." "You're not taking care of it. You're destroying it. The carpets are stained, the walls are damaged, and the yard looks like a jungle." She waved her hand. "It's just a house, Ava. It's not like it's a museum. It's my house, and I'm paying for it. And you're trashing it." She stood up, her expression hardening. "Well, maybe if you visited more often, you could help us keep it clean. But you're always too busy with your fancy career to care about your family." I stared at her, stunned. "Too busy? I just had brain surgery, Mom. I couldn't visit because I was recovering, and before that, I was working to pay for this house that you're living in for free." "For free? Nothing is free, Ava. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. This is the least you can do." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent my entire life believing that I owed my parents something, that their sacrifices justified their demands. But standing there in that filthy house, listening to my mother tell me that providing a roof over their heads was the least I could do, something snapped. "Get out!" I said quietly. "What? Get out of my house." She laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I'm selling the house. You have 60 days to find somewhere else to live." Her face went pale. "You can't do that. We have nowhere else to go." "That's not my problem." I turned and walked out, my heart pounding. I'd never spoken to my mother that way before. Part of me felt guilty, Part of me felt terrified, but another part, a part I'd been suppressing for years, felt free. I called Rachel from the car, my hands shaking. I did something. What? I told my mother I'm selling the house. There was a pause. Ava, that's huge. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That evening, I stopped paying the bills. Not the mortgage, that was automatic, tied to my bank account. But the utilities, the water, the electricity, the internet, all the little extras I'd been covering for years without a second thought. I called the utility companies and had the accounts transferred out of my name. I called the property tax office and confirmed that the next payment would come from me directly, not through my parents. Then, I waited. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. My mother called, her voice high and panicked. Ava, the power is off. We can't get the air conditioning to work. I transferred the utilities out of my name, I said calmly. You'll need to set up your own accounts. There was a long pause. What are you talking about? You've always paid the bills. And now I'm not. I'm selling the house, Mom. Remember? You can't do this to us. I already did. The notice to vacate will be delivered this week. She hung up on me. The notice to vacate was delivered by a process server on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother called me immediately, crying and screaming. My father sent a text. You're making a mistake. Tyler sent a longer message. I know you're angry, but this isn't just about you. We're your family. Don't do something you'll regret. I didn't respond to any of them. The first ally I found was my Aunt Donna. She called me a few days after the notice was delivered, her voice cautious. Ava, your mother tells me you're selling the house. That's right. Can I ask why? I told her everything. The cruise, the surgery, the house, the years of neglect. I told her about the photos, the text messages, the endless one-way street of sacrifice. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Donna spoke, her voice heavy with something I couldn't quite identify. I'm sorry, Ava. I didn't know. I knew things were strained, but I didn't realize. It's okay. You couldn't have known. I should have known. We all should have. She paused. What can I do to help? Just believe me, and maybe tell the rest of the family what's really happening. I'm tired of being the villain in their story. I'll do what I can. The rest of the family was less sympathetic. My Uncle Mike called to tell me I was tearing the family apart. My cousin Sarah sent a text, saying she never expected this from me. My grandmother, who was 92 and lived in a nursing home, apparently cried when she heard the news. I felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing. Part of me wanted to explain, to defend myself, to make them understand. But I'd spent my entire life explaining myself, and it had never once changed anything. So I stayed quiet. I let them think what they wanted. I focused on the process, on the legal steps, on the future I was building. Tyler showed up at my apartment one evening, unannounced. It was a week after the notice was delivered. I was sitting on my couch, reviewing legal documents, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Tyler standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His hair was unkempt, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes wrinkled. He smelled like cigarettes and desperation. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat on my couch, his hands clasped in his lap. For a long moment, he didn't speak. "I'm not here to beg," he finally said. "I'm here to explain." "Explain what?" "Why I didn't stand up for you. Why I went on the cruise. Why I've been such a waste of space my entire life." I sat down across from him. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "I know you think I don't care, but I do. I've always cared. I didn't know how to show it. Every time something went wrong, Mom and Dad would swoop in and fix it. And I let them, because I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of trying, scared of becoming someone who actually had to work for things." He looked at me, his eyes full of something that might have been shame. "When you told us about the surgery, I wanted to cancel the cruise. I told Mom and Dad we should stay, but they said no. They said you'd understand, that you always understood. And I didn't push hard enough. I should have pushed harder. Why didn't you? He laughed bitterly. Because I'm a coward. Because I've always been a coward. Because standing up to them would have meant facing my own failures, and I couldn't do it. I studied him, looking for the manipulation, the angle, but I didn't see one. Just a broken man, finally admitting the truth. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I'm not asking you to stop the sale. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me remembered all the times he'd let me down, all the times he'd chosen his own comfort over my needs. But another part of me remembered the boy on the porch steps, patting my back while I cried. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It means something. He nodded, stood up, and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. They needed to wake up. We all did. Then he was gone. The next morning, my mother called me, her voice cold. Your brother tells me you had a nice chat last night. Mom? Don't mom me. He came home and told us everything. How you're doing the right thing. How we needed to wake up. Is that what you think? That you're teaching us a lesson? I'm not trying to teach anyone a lesson. I'm just taking back control of my life. By making your own family homeless? By selling a house I own, by stopping the cycle of sacrifice that's been running my entire life. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost pleading. Ava, please, we can change. We can be better. Just give us another chance. I closed my eyes. I'd heard these words before, 1,000 times. They were always followed by the same patterns, the same disappointments, the same empty promises. I'm sorry, Mom, but I'm done giving chances. I hung up. The eviction hearing was brief. The judge reviewed the evidence, the deed, the notice. He ruled in my favor. My parents had 30 days to vacate. They didn't leave. For the next month, they stayed in the house, refusing to answer the door, refusing to respond to calls. I filed for a writ of possession, and the sheriff's department scheduled the removal. The day before the eviction, I drove to the house one last time. I parked across the street and watched as my father sat on the porch, smoking a cigarette, staring at the overgrown lawn. He looked old, tired, defeated. I almost got out of the car. I almost walked up to him and said, "What? That I was sorry? That I loved him? That I wished things were different?" But I didn't. I sat there, watching, until the sun went down. Then I drove home. The eviction was carried out on a Thursday morning. The sheriff's deputies arrived early, knocked on the door, and when no one answered, entered the property. I watched from across the street as my family emerged, one by one, carrying boxes and bags. My mother was crying. My father looked shell-shocked. Tyler walked with his head down, his expression unreadable. They loaded their things into a rental truck and drove away. I didn't follow them. I didn't call them. I just watched the truck disappear around the corner, then turned and walked back to my car. It was over. The morning after the eviction, I woke up in my apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Not happiness, exactly. Not relief, either. Just lightness. The absence of a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. The weight of obligation, of responsibility, of being the one who always had to fix things. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. The sun was rising over the buildings, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful. It had always been beautiful. But I'd never noticed before, too busy worrying about everyone else to see what was right in front of me. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it for a moment, then typed, "Free." The first month was the hardest. Not because I missed my family. I didn't, not really. But because I had to learn how to live without the constant noise of their needs. No phone calls asking for money. No emergencies requiring my immediate attention. No guilt trips about not being present enough. It was quiet. And quiet, I discovered, was terrifying. I'd spent my entire life defined by my role in the family. The responsible one. The reliable one. the one who showed up. Without that role, who was I? What was left? Rachel told me I was having an identity crisis. You've been defined by them for so long that you don't know who you are without them, she said. That's normal. It takes time to figure out who you are when the noise stops. She was right, but knowing that didn't make it easier. I threw myself into work. It was the only thing that felt familiar, the only thing that gave structure to my newly quiet life. I took on new projects, hired an assistant, expanded my practice. I worked late nights and early mornings, pushing myself harder than ever. But it felt different now. Before, I'd worked to support my family, to pay for the house, to be the provider they needed. Now, I was working for myself, for my own future, for the life I wanted to build. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Tyler called me 6 weeks after the eviction. I almost didn't answer. The last time we'd spoken, he'd shown up at my apartment with apologies and explanations, and I'd been moved by his words. But words are easy. Change is hard. Ava? His voice was different, clearer, more focused. I wanted to check on you. I'm fine. I know. I wanted to see how you're doing. Really. I hesitated. There was something in his tone that felt genuine, something I hadn't heard from him before. Not desperation, not manipulation, just concern. I'm okay, I said, adjusting. Me too. I got a job, actually, at a warehouse. It's not much, but it's something. I was surprised. Tyler had never held a job for more than 6 months in his life. That's good, Tyler. Really. Yeah, the therapist said I needed structure. Something to get me out of my own head. He paused. She also said I should apologize to you. Properly. Not the half-hearted stuff I said before. You already apologized. I know. But I want to do it again. Sober, clear-headed, without making excuses. He took a deep breath. Ava, I'm sorry. For everything. For never standing up for you. For going on the cruise. For being a burden when you were the one carrying everything. I'm sorry I wasn't the brother you deserved. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I'd waited my entire life to hear those words, and now that they were here, they felt almost too heavy to hold. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. We talked for another hour, about his job, his therapy, his slow, painful journey toward becoming a functioning adult. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. He just talked, and I listened. When I hung up, I realized something had shifted between us. The anger I'd felt toward him, the resentment, the bitterness, had softened. Not gone, not forgotten, but softened. Maybe that was what forgiveness looked like. Not a clean slate, but a willingness to move forward. My mother's calls were different. She called every few days, sometimes multiple times a day. Her messages alternated between angry accusations and tearful pleas. She blamed me for the family's destruction. She begged me to reconsider. She reminded me of everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd given up, everything I owed her. I let the calls go to voicemail. I read the texts and didn't respond. I had nothing left to say. But the messages wore on me. The guilt, the obligation, the years of conditioning, they didn't disappear overnight. Every time my phone buzzed with her name, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. You don't have to listen to her messages, Rachel said. You can block her number. I know, but I want to know what she's saying. I want to know if she's okay. Why? The question stopped me. Why did I care if she was okay? She'd chosen a cruise over my surgery. She'd trashed my house. She'd blamed me for her own failures. But she was still my mother, and some part of me, some stubborn, childish part, still wanted her to love me. The first time I saw my mother after the eviction was at a grocery store, of all places. I was in the produce section, picking through avocados, when I looked up and saw her at the end of the aisle. She was thinner than I remembered, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes rumpled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Our eyes met. For a long, terrible moment, neither of us moved. Then she turned and walked away. I stood there, an avocado in my hand, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Relief? Sadness? Loss? Maybe all of them. The house sold 3 months later. It went on the market in early summer, and within a week, we had multiple offers. The new owners were a young couple with a baby on the way. They were excited about the big backyard, the quiet street, the potential for growth. They reminded me of myself, years ago, when I'd first bought the house. I signed the closing documents in a lawyer's office, feeling the weight of the pen in my hand. This was it, the final step, the end of a chapter I'd spent years trying to close. When it was done, I walked out into the sunlight and felt tears streaming down my face. Not from sadness, from relief. From the overwhelming, bone-deep relief of finally being free. The months that followed were a blur of growth and change. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patel, and she helped me untangle the knots of guilt and obligation that had defined my relationship with my family for so long. She taught me about boundaries, about self-worth, about the difference between helping and enabling. Your family didn't just take advantage of your generosity, she said one session. They weaponized your love. They made you feel responsible for their happiness, their well-being, their entire existence. That's not love. That's control. The words stung, but they also made sense. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, trying to prove that I was worthy of their love. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. Recovery isn't about cutting them off completely, Dr. Patel continued. It's about learning to choose yourself, to recognize that your needs matter too, to understand that you can love someone without sacrificing your entire life for them. I wrote those words on a Post-it note and stuck it to my bathroom mirror. I read them every morning, reminding myself that I was allowed to matter. My father reached out once, 6 months after the sale. It was a letter, handwritten on lined paper, delivered to my office. I recognized his handwriting immediately, the careful, deliberate print of a man who'd never quite mastered cursive. The letter was short. 3 sentences. Ava, I know I wasn't the father you deserved. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of those words. He'd never apologized before, not once. And now, with everything over, he was finally saying what I'd needed to hear my entire life. It was too late, but somehow, it still mattered. The holidays came and went. I spent Thanksgiving with Rachel and her family, eating too much food and laughing at bad jokes. I spent Christmas alone, by choice, curled up on my couch with a book and a cup of tea. It was quiet, peaceful, exactly what I needed. My mother sent a text on Christmas morning, missing you. Hope you're well. I didn't respond. The necklace arrived in the spring. It was a small package, wrapped in brown paper, with no return address. I opened it carefully, already knowing from the handwriting who it was from. Inside was a gold chain with a small pendant, a bird in flight, my grandmother's necklace, the one she'd worn every day, the one that had been passed down to my mother when she died. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight. It was an heirloom, a piece of family history, and she'd given it to me. There was a note tucked inside the package. Ava, this belonged to my mother. She always said it would bring the wearer freedom. I think it belongs to you now. Love, Mom. I sat there for a long time, turning the necklace over, trying to decide what it meant. Was it a genuine gesture? A bribe? A last-ditch attempt to draw me back in? In the end, I put it on. Not because I forgave her, but because it was mine. Because it reminded me of my grandmother, who had always believed in me. Because wearing it felt like reclaiming something I'd lost. Last month, I drove back to my hometown. I told myself it was for work, a client meeting in a nearby city. But I knew the truth. I needed closure. I needed to see the house one last time, to remind myself of how far I'd come. The house looked different. The new owners had painted it a warm yellow, planted flowers in the front yard, and hung curtains in the windows. It looked alive, cared for, loved. I parked across the street and sat there, watching. A woman came out the front door, holding a toddler on her hip. She laughed at something, and the child laughed back. It was a scene of such simple, ordinary happiness that it made my chest ache. I thought about my parents, living in their small apartment across town. I thought about Tyler, still struggling but trying. I thought about myself, sitting in a car, watching a house that was no longer mine. And I realized that I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The house had been a symbol of my obligation to my family. Selling it had been an act of rebellion, a declaration that I would no longer be their doormat. But now, a year later, it had become something else, a reminder that I could walk away and survive, that I could build my own life, on my own terms, that I didn't need their permission to be happy. I started the car and drove away, leaving the house and everything it represented behind. I still wear the necklace sometimes. When I do, I think about my grandmother and about the person I've become. I think about the little girl who sat on the porch steps, crying about hand-me-down clothes. I think about the teenager who worked 3 jobs to save for college. I think about the woman who bought a house for her family, only to be abandoned when she needed them most. She was always enough. She always was. It just took brain surgery and a sold house for her to believe it. My family and I are not close. I don't know if we ever will be. My mother texts occasionally, and I respond politely but briefly. Tyler calls every few months, and our conversations are slowly becoming less stilted. My father doesn't reach out at all. I've accepted that this is how it will be. Some relationships are meant to be distant. Some wounds are too deep to fully heal, but I've learned that acceptance is not the same as defeat. It's simply the recognition that some things are beyond my control. What I can control is my own life, and for the first time in 36 years, I'm living it for myself.